let me ask you this. Would you say that neoliberalism is the wet blanket to progress?
Like, it's not even just a blanket of progress. They are an enemy of mankind. So what I mean by that,
Okay.
I always reframe stuff because people think I'm
Okay.
crazy, but people will say, "All right, you won't vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. That means you must prefer fascism over neoliberalism." And I'm like, this is a ridiculous argument because by doing that, the only thing you're not actually opposing fascism when you make that argument. The only thing you're actually accomplishing is whitewashing the crimes of neoliberalism by blindly just comparing it to just another ideology. So what I mean by that, what's responsible for Operation Condor, where the CIA killed socialists in Latin America, like innocent civilians? What's the ideology that's responsible for 2.3 million dead Iraqis right now? The destabilization of states, a slave market in Libya. You can call it fascism, but that's neoliberalism. So I'm not saying fascism is better than neoliberalism. I'm saying those are two different evils. So the idea for you to just randomly compare those two, I'm like, what are you talking about? You know what Joe Biden has done? He is responsible for the carceral state that we live in. He wrote the crime bill. He advocated for the death penalty for anything other than jaywalking. He said that on the Senate floor. I'm not making this up. So if you want to just blindly compare it to another ideology, Joe Biden is responsible for the destruction of the black community. Like, when you support NAFTA and these trade deals, who are hurt the most in those trade deals? It's the same thing that happened to black wealth when they was going after the unions in the Reagan era. So when they go after unions and they go after working class establishments, those actually hurt the black working class the most. And that's what Joe Biden has done his entire career with the crime bill and the bankruptcy bill. So this is the short-sightedness of liberals and progressives who apologize for Joe Biden because their brain is so short-sighted they can't even see the destruction that neoliberalism is responsible for. And they said, we got to vote for the lesser of two evils. How is what I just described the lesser of two evils? How? He's still going after the free press. He's still doing the same thing as Donald Trump did when it comes to Julian Assange. He's still supporting the coup in Venezuela. He still recognized Juan Guaido as an illegitimate leader. Mm-hmm. So these are the same forces of oppression that Trump prompted that Joe Biden is doing, but they call it the lesser of two evils. You know why they do that? They call it the lesser of two evils because it's not affecting their community. The white streamer who makes $200,000 a year, the New York Times journalist who's making God knows $500,000 a year. Those people are not harmed by Joe Biden policy, so they write op-eds like, Joe Biden's not that bad a guy. Meanwhile, the cops are killing us every fucking day. Like, literally, right when they announced that Derek Chauvin was going to get convicted, right when they announced that, there was a police killing. What was that? The black teenager, right? Right when they were like, oh, everything is great now. Bro, dude, before the end of the day, there's probably going to be another one. Before the end of the week, at least. I can't even keep track of all the names now.
I do want to talk.
Go ahead. I talked to the RJ.
I do want to clear up kind of what I said earlier about the scenario I was talking about where you have organizations that general strike that do protest. But what happens if a state and a state's government isn't as sympathetic to the strategy of really embarrassing a government to do something that they didn't want to do in the first place? And some people in the comments did correct me. There are plenty of instances in which that have happened. So I do want to apologize and make that quick correction. So I guess my question to the rest of you is what do we do when, let's say, the United States government and a state government, we do the right thing. We protest, we general strike, we do everything in our power to try to gain exposure to a state about what we feel is doing wrong, and they're no longer sympathetic for it. And one strategy, which I believe they do, is they do manufacturing consent. So they smear us saying, oh, well, see, you guys are too far lefties, or you guys really don't know what's going on. This is what we're doing behind the scenes. And I feel like they're using the progressive politicians as a terms of that to mask the movement and make it even harder for us to get what we want. So I guess my question to you guys is, what do we do then if the government really is no longer sympathetic to these type of movements, even if we do protest? Because that's kind of my biggest fear of really what can continue after this.
I'm going to sound like Rome right now. Viva la revolution. That's the only thing I can think of. And the thing is that look, what did Kennedy say? He said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable." So that being said, the thing is that with the general strike, that is pretty much the last bastion of resistance that we would have before a violent revolution takes place. And the thing, I think it was one of the people that you interviewed. I forget his name. Thomas Frank.
Right.
I think he said something to the effect of, "That's general strike is right before a revolution." So the thing is if we get to a point where we actually successfully do a general strike, and if they aren't sympathetic to us by that point, it's going to break. It's about to drop. That's what's going to happen. And the thing is that a general strike, and like I was telling to a follower on Twitter, a general strike, one of the only ways it can actually be successful and be implemented is if people feel like they have nothing else to lose. And if people have nothing else to lose, and the state or the federal government is still not sympathetic to them, then guess what? Then the shit is going to hit the fan. And that's what's going to happen. I have nothing else to say. I wish I can give a better answer than that. But the thing is that every single time in these United States, when we have gotten to that point, a revolution happens. Same thing that happened, basically in 1776. Every single time that we've actually had to fight for, like for instance, the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement. We've had to engage in some type of, physical conflict to actually get the things that we should have had a long time ago. I don't want it to happen, but the problem is that may be the necessary evil.
What's your thoughts, Nick?
Hit me with the question one more time.
I said, so let's say, this is a hypothetical. So let's say a movement does a general strike, protests a lot, and the government, whether it's state or federal, still isn't sympathetic enough to the people in which we could make them do something that they wouldn't want to do otherwise. What do you think we should do, or what do you believe can be done? So that's kind of the question.
It's dependent on what community you're talking to. Because I saw some discussion on Black Leftist Twitter, and we got to be kind of honest with the situation right now. And this is why I come to the conclusion I came with. When you look at the state of Black America right now, politically on the national level, we're pretty screwed. We're not in a good position right now because you have. I'm glad that you have a lot of different communities that have policies being pushed on their demand, but there's nothing in terms of what will help the Black community being advocated for. So I wrote a piece about how when you look at Medicare for All, that's the most pro-Black policy you can advocate for because the state of the healthcare system in America is killing Black Americans. We have a life expectancy that is like 7 years lower than white men. And it's continuing to drop. Our infant mortality rate is 4 times higher than white women. We're being killed by our healthcare system because people don't go to the doctor because it's too expensive. Meanwhile, despite that, we have a president that can't even uphold the promise that is already a shitty compromise of a compromise. So they don't even support Medicare for All. There was a comment. I'll see if I can find it real quick. They were like, he said only 11 Democratic senators are on record for supporting Medicare for All. As of today, 11 senators of the Democratic Party, the so-called pro-Black party, don't support what I call, and I wrote in great detail, Why it's the most pro-black policy. And he continued to say this commie Hilliger, they've been leaving great comments all day. We don't have a Joe Manchin, a Sinema Biden problem. We have a Democratic Party problem. And big shout out to you because I seen you leaving great comments. That's another great one because that kind of back up the point I'm making here. So I'm not trying to be doomy and gloomy because I got a solution to this, but I want people to wake up and stop being delusional. So once again, we don't have what's the black version, like someone in power, like an actual senator that will go for back for black issues the same way that Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema will go to back for Wall Street because they voted against and they denied a living wage for Americans. They denied a $15 minimum wage, and then after that they got a Wall Street speaking gig, and they gain money from Wall Street, and they know that's their allies in the Senate. My question to you guys is, what is our version of that? And once again, we can only speak on behalf of our communities, but I would span it even more. I would span like what the Latino version of that, what the indigenous people version of that. What's the rural poor white version of that, really? But for the sake of the segment, once again, I'm only going to speak on behalf of my community. We are the Hampton Leftists. So what's the black community equivalent of a Joe Manchin? It doesn't exist. It does. I'm sorry, guys. My friend Sky has been breaking it down on Twitter. I'm very glad to see her profile explode because she tell you guys are getting fucking sheep herded, and you guys are having false hope for no reason, putting all your effort into electoral politics, which is essentially caping and giving jobs to millionaires. That's what you're doing. You think that's going to actually save our community? When has that happened? You have people who are like, oh, you guys got so much expectation of Joe Biden, the Democrat Party. They do their best for Black Americans, ignoring the fact that racial income inequality got worse under Biden and Barack Obama. It's going to get worse under Joe Biden right now. I guarantee you, with the policies that he has right now, it's going to get worse. We got to wait about 5 to 6 years. That's how long it takes. Because those op-eds on Obama was being read later, once they did analysis of the wealth of the Black Americans over the last few years. So wait, we got to wait until like 2016, 2027. But I guarantee you, with the neoliberal capitalist policies that they're implementing, it's only going to get worse. And then when that happens, just like we're doing today, unfortunately, I'm going to be there to tell you guys I told you so. Because I warned you guys about letting the establishment use Trump to fearmonger you, to vote for a guy who's been supporting the Jim Crow policy his entire career. The bare minimum, which he ran on, by the way, is decriminalizing marijuana. I don't like decriminalization. I'm a supporter of legalization. So that's a compromise of a compromise already. Mm-hmm. And then they just said, we can't decriminalize marijuana, which you can easily do with a stroke of a pen. We can't do that because we're so busy working on behalf of Americans. We're so busy working on behalf of Americans, we can't end the fucking Jim Crow system, the new Jim Crow system that's going on. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and a lot of AOC steps now, they're so dumb, they don't even realize they're being bullshitted too. And then they think, the ruling class, they think these people are dumb. So when you hear Joe Biden and Kamala Harris say stuff like, oh, sorry, we can't decriminalize marijuana because we're too busy. What? Who is that for? Who would believe in that shit? They think you're a dumb. And honestly, a lot of resist Twitter, they are. Sorry. So anyway, back to the question. Answer your question. We need to focus on our communities. I talked to a lot of my good friends on Twitter. It may seem like a pipe dream now, but socialist communities, communist communities where we take care of each other. That's the only benefit of any sort of capital in me. I'm a straight anti-capitalist. I'm not materialistic. The only value of resources for me is freedom. So I think that's what we should focus on. We're not going to have any victory electorally. Sorry, guys, to burst your bubble. If we do, it's going to take 15 to 20 years when the demographics change. And by then, climate change will be too late. So sorry, guys. That's the reality of the situation. Bernie was our last chance. So what we got to do right now, we got to focus on building communities, social communes, and make life easier for your neighbor because it's not going to come from the government. Sorry.
Yeah, let's all just build a socialist commune in Nevada since the Democrats already left. Yeah. So let's just all move to Nevada.
I'm down. I heard Peru is a pretty good state too.
Yeah. So, and we have one last topic. I want JB's input on this. Apparently, there's Forced to Vote Discourse Part 2000 because our friend Brianna Joy Gray, she put out a tweet the other day about Forced to Vote and some of its misconceptions and some of why some people aren't for it and why it could have been implemented better. Okay. JB, what are your thoughts on it overall? If you've watched the video, and why do you believe this is continuing to be brought up 24/7?
I think that is necessary to continue to be brought up 24/7 because forced to vote is a strategy that should be implemented whenever possible. The reason being is because, like I said in one of my tweets earlier, that there will never, ever, ever, ever be a perfect time to try to implement something. You cannot ask your way to Medicare for all. You cannot ask your way to a Green New Deal. You have to demand it. And the only way to do that is carrots and sticks, or making sure that you force the vote. You make it so that it threatens them, so that they have to acquiesce to your demands for something that is tangible. The problem is that you have some people who are too fucking comfortable, and then they go, oh, we can wait. The people who are typically for forcing the vote are people that have a sense of urgency, and they are like, we cannot wait. This is the whole reason why forced to vote was so important. Because those of us who don't have health insurance, look, I got a boyfriend. He has no health insurance, period. Nothing. So if something happens to him, then what? Many of us are just, a sickness or some type of tragic event away from maybe losing our jobs or something like that. And, a lot of these policies are just the bare minimum, the floor. So, yeah, I think that next time, if there's some crucial vote that has to be done, like, I don't know, like a debt ceiling or something like that, yeah, hold it up. Take it hostage and then say, look, unless we get these tangibles for these people, unless we get these, then no, we're not going to do it, and we're going to block it.
And I have the actual clip that everyone was freaking out about, so I'll share that for everyone right now.
Please do.
Just for some contextual purposes. So give me a second.
So the funny thing is, you have a lot of people who think forced to vote was a bad idea, which makes no sense because I explained earlier on how forced to vote was literally a 2019 DSA strategy that both Ilhan Omar literally endorsed the idea last year. And then
I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what happened earlier on this year that wasn't discussed enough that I covered on my show? Cory Bush and a few members in Democratic Congress, they forced to vote on whether we should give voting rights for convicted felons. And that was a great move. I'm very happy that Cori Bush has done that because she did what we advocate for. That's an important issue, restoring voting rights to felons. So she forced to vote on that issue, and it failed. It failed. Over half of Democrats voted against restoring voting rights and ending the new Jim Crow. Isn't that amazing? So now, how I like to frame issues. So what I like to say is now we have over half of the Democratic Party that is against voting rights. So they're like, oh, look at the Georgia voting law. Isn't that so crazy? Like, bro, you guys are not for democracy either. Joe Biden is responsible for how many millions of Americans losing their voting rights over the last few years, over the last few decades. And then Cori Bush forced a vote to restore those voting rights that Joe Biden is responsible for taking away. And then Democrats voted against it. And then they want to pretend they're the pro-democracy party. But that's an important takeaway, and that's why I used to attack the Democratic Party on, because Cori Bush forced to vote. So since she forced to vote, we know what Democrats are full of shit when they say they are fighting for democracy. That's the value in the strategy. One of many values of the strategy. So how can Cori Bush and people who are sympathetic to them be supportive of her doing that, which I am, but they are against forced to vote for Medicare for all. I'll just leave you guys with that nugget because it doesn't make any sense to me, right?
Right, and then I got the clip right here, and the whole message too. The other prominent forced to vote people were saying is look, it's not just for Medicare for all. If you want to come in and add as many of our list to it as you want, get the whole list. Don't just negotiate yourself down before you get to the table. Add anything else you want. That's what a lot of people are saying. But here's the clip, and we'll play it for you guys. It's about 2 minutes. We'll play it in the entirety.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, does anyone hear it?
No, I don't hear it.
Okay, 1 second. Let me try it again.
Yeah.
1 second.
All good. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I forgot to. Every time I have to click, when I click present, I actually have to click share audio. So that's actually my fault. Okay, 1 second, everybody. It should work now. And okay, popped up on the screen. Yep, it's there. And I'll press play from its entirety.
Let's see if I can find some
Okay,
comments.
and here we go.
Epic, and I know that people are so frustrated that we keep going back to $15 minimum wage and force the vote, but those were important moments because the $15 minimum wage was reconciliation. It was a 50 vote situation, and that's why there was so much importance attached to it. And force the vote was so important because it was where Nancy Pelosi has so much control over all of these process issues, could actually be forced to do some of the things that would have enabled the process to be smoother here, to have agreed to having committee meetings, to agree to the committee appointments that the progressives never actually got, to agree to rule changes around pay-go and the like that were only done in a partial piecemeal manner, despite how they've been celebrated. And those moments mattered. And knowing how much in retrospect, in particular, as powerless as we feel now, how much potential was in those moments really makes you think about why there was so much seemingly coordinated pushback against even having a conversation about how to design a strategy around those moments. And when you look at the obstacles we're up against now and the things that some members of our left community were saying back then, like, we just don't have enough time to figure it out. That was your main objection to force the vote. Oh, it's going to be hard to organize in a short time frame. Well, there's no possibility of anything now. What was it? Was it harder to try to put together some pressure around force the vote in a few weeks, or is it harder to try to move for a general strike or mass protests in West Virginia to get Joe Manchin or whomever to really seriously consider the filibuster? There's a real like scale issue here, and it all just starts to feel like, I don't know. I mean, it's just gaslighting on gaslighting on gaslighting.
What was interesting is when she posted this, when you see the response, no one was addressing the points at all. And these people, I'm not even interested in really giving them that much of a benefit of doubt no more. People, I was talking to some friends earlier. I want people need to understand that if you was against this policy, which one I wrote that Medicare for all the most pro-black policy that you can advocate for, and you are against doing anything you can to push Overton window left on that. The Bernie movement was a giant movement of people, but we got to come to the conclusion that a lot of those people that was in that movement, they're not really fighting on behalf of our communities. They are just fighting behalf of what they think is just they just politically coasting because they're comfortable, they're fine. I talked to the RJ, but that's what I saw when I saw those people pushing back on her, because none of them was attacking her on the merits of arguments. It was more like straw mans and attacks. So I'm done trying to win those people over. I said earlier, my focus on winning non-voters, people who are the independents, people who are not operatives of the Democratic Party, because there's a large segment of society that we can win over. That we continue to win those over every day, right, RJ?
Yeah. So let's dig into this. So I do agree that we need general strikes, we need mass protests, we need mass organizations, and yada yada yada. Yes, they do take a long time. Yes, we should still do them. But the whole argument too of why force the vote was it was a quick and easy strategy where you don't necessarily need all of that, but it could still have the same effect. It's taking advantage of a political system and structure put in place. If you look at the core critiques from the beginning, it was like, look, progressives, due to the slim majority that the Blue Dogs Democrats dug themselves into. You now have the power. If you're in the House, you have potentially 7 to 15 progressives that's all it takes to crush. It depends on the type of legislation to crush it in the House to prevent their Senate from even voting on it. And even Bernie Sanders has that power. And in fact, I'm giving Bernie Sanders a lot more credit than I do the House because he has used his power a lot more. For instance, Bernie Sanders being the budget chairman, he himself put the $15 minimum wage on the Senate floor for it to be voted on. The Blue Dog Dems, Republicans came together to crush it. Now, you could now too. The funniest part is Bernie was fighting to keep it in the bill itself. So if the bill stayed inside the budget reconciliation bill, it would have kept a 51 vote threshold needed. The problem is the corporate Democrats filibustered their own fucking bill to raise the threshold to 60 so they can have an excuse not to do it. And it was still good that Bernie Sanders put it on the floor themselves to expose what the Democrats were doing. So that was great. All we're saying is the House progressives, you, by having a solid contingency block, you actually avoid scrutiny much better than Bernie. Because if it's Bernie by himself, the entire mass media Democratic landscape will fucking crush him for it. But you as House progressives, you can share blame. AOC isn't the one that has to have all the vitriol. But if you guys come together and say, hey, look, we're going to stop a bill for this policy. We're going to stop for this one. If you all share blame, then it makes it easier to function as a contingency block. You know, and of course, people say, oh, well, the Tea Party, they had like 30, 40 members compared to the progressive 7 to 15. We recognize that. I understand that. I'm not going to debunk you for it. But the Tea Party movement themselves, they were much more able to be hated. And they shared the hatred amongst themselves way better than the House progressives do. And I really don't like, too, that, hey, you know, you're leaving her out to dry, AOC out to dry, even if she is wrong. But it does kind of help. It does kind of hurt the type of really movement if you're doing. I don't know if they're doing this strategy, but this is what people were saying that they could do to make it better to get these policies enacted. And that's kind of the message and the strategy of it overall.
So I just want to, I don't have to stay this long. I'll pass it right back to JB on this. I just want to propose a question to Erica. They said forced to vote wasn't going anywhere, and it was kind of ridiculous shot in the dark. So I'm not going to fight you. My question to you is, what is the downsides of having a national debate on the merits of single-payer healthcare versus the insurance-based model based on employment, where a lot of people lost their jobs in the middle of a pandemic? Where exactly do we lose in that? To start a debate on that. Do you know how foolish the people that are arguing against single-payer healthcare and arguing in favor of employment-based healthcare will look? You know, Joe Biden got away. He got away with backing away a public option. If we had forced to vote and there was a national debate on healthcare, that would be, we would have had a spotlight on that. And we're like, okay, you guys are not for Medicare for all. What happened to that public option thing he was talking about? So my question to you is, where exactly do we lose when a debate like this is started? I don't think we lose, right? Because we are in the right. Medicare for all is supported by a vast majority of American people. And then we look at these Congress, their approval ratings is in the toilet. I mean, you had Nancy Pelosi spearheading the argument against a popular policy when she is less popular than Donald Trump. So how is that going to go well for the establishment? I pass it to JB. I just wanted to put that thought out there. I just want you to consider that, right? Mm-hmm. Go ahead, JB.
Yep. Forced to vote wouldn't have been a shot in the dark if the squad actually did it. Then it would have actually gained popularity. And the media would have had no choice but to cover it, because they would have said, oh, there's fracture in the Democratic Party. What's going on? Then next thing you know, people like, Jamal Bowman, AOC, Cori Bush, people like them would have went, on all the Sunday shows and said, well, look, the Democratic Party is, many of them are being divisive because 80% of Democrats actually want Medicare for all. We're just doing what the people want. And so they would have been able to do that instead, and that actually would have gained a lot more attention, and it wouldn't have been a shot in the dark. But unfortunately, because they refused to pick this up, even though it was originally a DSA strategy, and actually the fact that AOC and Ilhan Omar themselves talked about it as being a good strategy months prior, and now they're suddenly reneging on that, then you know what? That actually says more about them than it says about those of us who want the force to vote.
I just put the tweet in the chat, so you guys know what I'm talking about. Cause that's the tweet where let me read. I'll read it out loud. This is from March 2nd. Cori Bush. For the first time ever, the House took a vote on whether or not to end the cruelty of denying incarcerated people their right to vote. Our amendment didn't pass, but 97 Democrats voted with us. We will not stop fighting until we dismantle white supremacy on this forum. Which is, once again, I am supportive of this. My response to her, I was like, I'm glad you guys forced the vote on this issue. I'm glad you guys did that. But the funny thing is, I'm very interested in how she. Actually, I want to screen share this. I think this is important to share, and then I'll pass it to RJ. I don't know how long you guys plan to go, but
we could wrap up soon, actually.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm gonna make the last point. I'll pass it to you, RJ. So this is what I was referring to earlier. This is the tweet, so you guys see it. And this was my response. I said, I'm so glad you guys forced the vote on this. Because I let you guys, that's essentially what they did. They forced the vote on this thing. It didn't pass, which is okay, because now we know the Democrats that didn't vote for it. But it's very interesting how Cori Bush framed it, because she said 97 Democrats voted for us. Why did she frame it that way instead of the way my friend Tamanisha John put it? She said, nice. Now we know less than half of House Democrats believe in voting right, because that's another way you can frame that. Instead of saying that 97 Democrats voted for us, you could easily just said that less than half of the Democrats believe in that and voted for that, right? I passed RJ because I wanted to try that because that's what I was referring to earlier. But that's something I want you guys to kind of consider.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add one more thing? And I think a lot of people who are anti-force to vote on this, a lot of them are so focused on, well, it'll never pass. So what's the point? And the funny thing is that there's still a victory even if it doesn't pass, because now you know who is going to be actually against it so that you can actually campaign against them, and then you can actually make them the enemy. Or you could, use your leverage to pressure and say, well, this person, say for instance, Val Demings, my representative, well, she doesn't support Medicare for all, and so you can go on all the shows, and then next thing you know, it puts the fire underneath her. Well, do you not support Medicare for all? Do you not support universal health care for everybody? And then that would probably force her hand, and even in a cynical way, to save her seat, but she still would have ended up voting for Medicare for all, even cynically. I don't care if they're cynically doing it or if they're doing it, out of the goodness of their hearts. I don't care. Either way, if it gets voted on, fine. And so this is one of the tools that force to vote does, is that it will force the hand of Democrats to be able to actually push for something, even if they're not really for it, because they want to just keep their seats. It's using their ambition and their careerist mindset against them so that we get what we actually need.
I agree. And I see some comments in the chat about some objections to it, saying that, and look, I said this from the jump, I agree with using grassroots organizations. So the argument too that, you can't use really social media in general as a shortcut. Well, social media and mainstream media in general has been used by the establishment all the time to get electoral prowess. I mean, have we seen what happened with COVID and how MSNBC, CNN, many of these pundits on Twitter as well were propping up Joe Biden, making him seem like he was the greatest thing since sliced bread? That has an effect too. I mean, newspapers, the mail, that has always throughout American history has been important tools for elections as well. Mm-hmm. And, the whole point of this argument in general is people are desperate. So yes, we're building up our grassroots movements, doing everything you can. Mm-hmm. But we should try multiple different strategies all at once to see what sticks, to see what works. So on the left, we should be willing to try everything we can.
Mm-hmm.
To get what we want done.
Oh, exactly. And by the way, force to vote was actually proposed by grassroots. So therefore, to say that we should be going through the grassroots strategy, that was a grassroots strategy. So this, so If you're really paying attention, then you'll realize that forced to vote was actually something that was done from the ground up.